Rolled off the table.
A
1.
1. The topic we'll be discussing today, guys, is how do you balance levity, action, and drama in your games? This was a topic added by Tim Saucer way back in episode 51.
Hello and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion about topics related to running role-playing games. I'm Chris Salzman.
I'm Andy Rao.
And this week we are joined by Laura. Hi, Laura.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. So, Laura, we got connected with you through Tim Saucer, the person who we just rolled his topic on the table. He had mentioned that you'd be a great guest, and he'd been talking about you for a little bit. So I'm glad that we can finally get you on the podcast. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And I'm going to do kind of a leading question. I know that you were involved with UConn, the convention that happens nearby.
That's right. By day, I'm a software engineer, and by night, I'm an organizer for UConn. I've been doing that for quite a long time. Folks who go to the convention might know me if they're a GM because my name shows up on registration and our social media a lot. So, UConn is UCON-gaming.org. And we're going to be holding an in-person convention, if everything goes right, in November.
Oh, fantastic.
Mm-hmm. How big is UConn? So I have yet to come because I seem to I just had a baby last year, so it just wasn't good timing and the whole pandemic and stuff as well.
Excuses.
Yeah. How big is?
Pre-pandemic, our last convention was 1,150 people.
Wow.
So yeah, that's
amazing.
We're not small potatoes. We're not like Gen Con, but it's pretty good size and it's a really good time, big enough to have lots of different types of games.
So have you been with it since it was tinier than that?
Yes and no. So the convention started in 1989. I've been with them since 2001-ish. I think I was a GM for a couple of years before that. We were 500 people at the time. So it was smaller, but it's grown since we moved into our new venue in Ypsilanti, Eagle Crest, or the Ann Arbor Marriott Ypsilanti at Eagle Crest. You have to say it like they do.
So how did you get involved with UConn to begin with? You said you were a GM for a while, and then at some point you stepped up into kind of a leadership role?
Yeah, I got involved with UConn the same way I got involved with gaming in general, and that's my sister. You know, she gave me my first Magic cards. She brought me to the gaming club at the university, and then she encouraged me to go to the convention, which had recently split off from the gaming club organization. And then I started hanging out with those folks and joined the team and never looked back.
Does UConn have a flavor or a style that is a little bit unique to it, do you think? What's the kind of atmosphere at UConn?
Yeah, my pitch is that we are a boutique gaming convention. So we are small enough to be intimate that you might actually have a shot at meeting the guests of honor. You know, we put their events up on the website and they sell out just like every other event. So if you want to meet a guest, you can also join us in the bar at 11 o'clock every night because they just hang out and chat with everyone. They're so personable.
Oh, that's so great. Imagine that's a little bit different at Gen Con, for example. There's probably tenders and minders for every
pay $20 for a headshot and never meet them in a game. Yeah.
I imagine all the guests of honor are, special and wonderful to have. Is there anyone that has showed up as a guest of honor that was especially meaningful or neat for you based on your personal experience?
So I was con chair several times. In one year, we had Sid Meier of Sid Meier's Civilization come.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
His kid was attending the university at the time, and we got connected up. And so I got to play Rock Band with Sid Meier. It was so cool.
Oh, my goodness. That's great.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Who's on deck for this year, assuming that the con is able to take place?
Because of the pandemic, we've made the choice not to have Game Masters this year, but we've got a couple of people cooking for next year, but I can't share yet.
That's great.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you run games yourself, right? And so you had mentioned when we were just chatting over email that you ran a very long campaign of East Texas University.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay, so I looked that up because I was like, I think that's like actual university, right? As well,
No,
or
it's totally
okay,
fictitious. So
okay,
it's a campaign setting for the Savage Worlds system by these folks. Their company was 12 to Midnight. I think that's who still owns it. So it's basically imagine Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but set in
hmm
a college town in Texas. And
hmm
it's got all those Texas flavors, barbecue and football, and you can walk around carrying guns and weapons, so that makes it
yeah,
feel a little bit more like D&D in that sense.
that sounds so fun. And you had mentioned that it was a multi-year campaign as well, right?
Yes, I took them through freshman year through senior year.
Nice. Okay.
With it was mostly original content. All of the major arcs were original content, but the 12 to Midnight folks put out these one-pager modules. That's like as much module as I really want. And so I would find places to work them into the story,
hmm
just to have a little bit of extra material, take a little bit of load off sometimes.
Did you know when you started the campaign that you were likely to run, all 4 years of the character's college experience? That's a wonderful framework for a game, I think.
Yeah, that was totally the goal. Even though I just ended the campaign with their senior year in January, I am thinking about going back and doing a 1 year after
Yeah.
adventure. The people love this game so much they don't want to let go of these characters. So I'm
Oh.
Yeah.
trying to think of a way to do that.
Well, you've got like 5-year reunion and 10-year reunion and lots of
Yeah.
excuses to get them back together, right?
Yeah, well, one of them ended up becoming a fairly powerful magic user, and they
Okay.
dealt with portal magic in the last season. So they've decided that they have spread to the ends of the earth and they get together with portals. And so I am positive that I can come up with some reason that draws them back together.
Yeah.
They all ended up pairing off as well, so they can go save one of the significant others.
That's great. Laura, I have some concerns that maybe they didn't do so well in their senior year at college, though. Did they?
Well,
Did they get grades?
you would think that they definitely had some issues with that. One of the players decided to take their major as law enforcement.
Nice.
So all of their activities felt right in line with that.
I don't know much about East Texas University as a game, but how much of like a typical game was like adventure stuff and how much of it was dealing with the mundanities of college, the college experience? Like, it's neat that they got to pick majors and stuff. Like, how much did you dig into that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the game is built around balancing those things. So they have mechanics for taking midterms and finals. Um,
That's great.
I loved incorporating class into the story because, I mean, if there's not class in the story, then you really don't feel like you're in college. Actually, that's a funny point. Two of my players never went to college, and so this was their college experience.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, at the beginning there was a lot of college experience. A pep rally featured into the first episode. Lots of football games. One of the players was his character did football, so so yeah, there was a lot of college experience in there. Although I think as it kind of progressed toward the end, there was a major plot that had very little to do with college, and so it would ebb and flow.
It's sort of like the Harry Potter problem of like Hogwarts is very magical and stuff, but if you just have them in class all the time, it's gonna be super boring.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
one of the things that I loved was bringing in characters for you to play off of. So, like there were, the sorority chicks. The sorority girls were like a major thing, and they would come in, and you would do like the one-upmanship with the clothes, right? And oh, I went to the football game. How are you? And I got to do my Valley Girls sometimes. I love that.
Nice.
Are you planning another campaign or have you already started of something else after East Texas University?
I haven't decided what to run with that group, but I have a different group. They have overlapping members where I'm running a game called Part-Time Gods.
Okay. What is that?
It's in the flavor of like the Lucifer TV show or like the American Gods TV show, where it's just very powerful, godlike people, supernatural people walk around the earth and have to deal with mundane threats as well as mystical threats. It's like part-time. So the mechanics in the game are all about I have to go deal with this monster that's rising up out of the river, except that my mother wants me to have dinner with the family.
Yeah.
Or my sister landed in jail for some reason and I got to go bail her out. And just back and
Yeah.
forth, lots of stuff to intermix. It's a little bit like the same reason I like East Texas.
That's really good. I'm gonna transition us into our topic because I think this is a pretty good segue into it. So it seems like you are constantly sort of in the games that you're interested in balancing like all these different levity and action and drama, right? Like you're bouncing between all of them. So like when you are structuring one of these sessions, do you sit down and say like, okay, like we need to make sure that there's a midterm test. We need to make sure that there's a I don't know, like another portal wizard who shows up. Like, yeah, like how do you manage to get sort of all that into a session or a campaign?
Oh, that's a super broad question because I
know.
don't think about structuring a story like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
If you want to structure a story, you go to the 3-act thing. So, an introduction, a middle section, and then a big ending, right? So somewhere in there's going to be some college life going on if we're talking about East Texas. And then there's so many opportunities for comedy in college life, like interacting with a nerd or a socially different person versus interacting with a football player versus all those things are different and they're different opportunities for some levity.
Yeah.
We talk from time to time on the show about the idea of kind of adventure slapstick as the default tone of an awful lot of games that we've run and played in. I have something of like the opposite problem in the campaign I'm running now, which is a kind of a dark military fantasy campaign using the Band of Blades system. And that one, there's not a lot of levity at all in that. And I've lately been thinking, especially after a really grim game a few weeks ago, I've been thinking like, how can I make this a little bit more like just lighthearted without tanking the tone of the game, which is dark military?
I mean, from what I know of Band of Blades, right, they're sort of on a death march across a continent.
Yes.
Right? Okay. So there probably isn't a whole lot of like, I mean, could you insert Tom Bombadil? Like just give him a little breather, right?
Well, yeah, it would. The humor would probably have to come from unusual characters or situations that I kind of threw in their path because, most of what they're doing is kind of deadly serious for the most part. But it is nice. It is interesting to have that problem because normally I am running that adventure slapstick sort of thing where it's kind of serious, but it gets jokey real quick. Yeah.
See, I know people love Tom Bombadil. I do not.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
He felt like an interruption to everything. So I don't know if I was going to suggest something, I would find some levity in the misery of the situation. It's been raining. I'm soaked. I have blood all over me. Something like that, or somebody making a Shakespeare reference in the middle of that, like out damn spot out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So one thing that the players brought that I didn't plan that has brought some laughter into the game is they've been nicknaming everything. So we aren't using like the book's official name for like the different monsters they run into. And they also are usually adventuring. They usually have like a pack of rookie soldiers along with them. And when a rookie distinguishes him or herself like in a game session, they usually get a nickname, and it's usually something fairly funny. So it's still deadly serious, but you do get, you laugh when the name comes up and then you move on.
Do the characters like know modern references?
So far they've been not being too anachronistic about it. So it's mostly been, I guess, setting appropriate stuff so far.
Oh, I don't know the setting. So is it?
It's
not
like
like a modern
medieval fantasy setting.
One of the advantages of ETU, since it's modern, is they are happy to bring in pop culture references, and so a lot of our levity is pop culture. Like they will pick some music that I loved as a kid, and they'll be like, "That's so old. It's our parents' stuff," because they're college age, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so is that set in like 2021? Is that like the time period? Okay.
Oh, you can set it when you want, but some people will set it in the 80s. But I did with the times, so I started in 2016.
This is a non sequitur, but I just watched Fear Street 1994 last night, It's a new horror movie. It's out on Netflix right now. But so it's set in 1994, which is interesting to me because like that's sort of like when I was growing up, right? I align with the 90s kid idea, right? But we haven't gotten a lot of movies about the 90s quite yet. Like everybody sets it in the 80s, right? But like, so the 90s. So the soundtrack was all this like really great, like mid 90s music that like I used to listen to on the radio all the time. It was very like comforting to hear a soundtrack like that, even though it was, like people were dying left and right during the movie. But,
how heavy did East Texas University get? Did your campaign get? The way you've described it, you mentioned Buffy. So I think of Buffy. I've only watched maybe half of that show's run, but from what I watched, there's like a level of like irony or like kind of meta, some goofiness lurking behind most of that.
They've talked, the writers have talked about the fact that they write the show where the monsters are a metaphor for some aspect of life.
Okay.
I did that a couple of times. I don't know that I did it all the time. The thing for me about role-playing games, especially when you have a campaign rather than like a one-shot around a convention table, is that you can make it really, really personal to the characters. Mm-hmm. So when I had a new character come in and the other characters weren't quite really jiving with that new character, I said, let's do a field trip adventure, right? So they had Thanksgiving in New York. The character in question is Val. And so they went to New York to meet Val's rich parents and hang out with her church friends, and then find out that she lived a life of crime, and her the person who got her into that life shows up, and you're like, uh-oh. And then it turns out he's in with the church and he's all good. And she's like, something's going on. And so we had a whole adventure that revolved around her backstory, and they loved it. It was so personal to them. But where I was going with this is that one of the characters ended up murdering a human and was so upset about that as a character, like, oh my God, I committed murder, that we ended up having an entire session that was just the characters dealing with the fact that that had happened. It was an entire episode with no action. It was just one-on-one scenes where people were getting their feelings out. And it was very, very almost cathartic, very emotional.
So that was pretty high in drama, I would imagine. Were you facilitating that, or is that something that they started to decide that they wanted to have these conversations?
I had been running plot, because that's what I usually do. And we had just kind of recognized that there was all this stuff building up. And so there needed to be a tension release. So we had to have that all come out through the game, and that's how it ended up working out.
I found whenever I have a dramatic moment, it is usually after some sort of event has happened. And when I have those, I often just like ask pretty directly to him, right? So going back to the concept of having like this default of slapstick comedy, I think people will stay there unless you challenge them a little bit. Not challenge, that makes it seem more like therapy. Just like let's explore this different aspect of the adventure, the narrative that we're doing. But like I think most people really enjoy doing that now and then. Yeah, having that session, we're just like, yeah, let's do some emotional character work.
Yeah, that's really fun. As long as it doesn't turn into therapy, I'm great with that.
Do you guys have any go-to tricks or gimmicks that you pull out if maybe things are getting a little too serious in tone, or there needs to be a shakeup of some sort? Like there's I think it's Raymond Chandler's writing advice was to have people kick in the door and start shooting anytime he got stuck on a scene. But
Yeah, I was going to say, I can always count on one of my players to just be over the top with flirtation to incense somebody off and start something that way. But yeah, I follow that rule of if things get too boring, if a scene's dragging out, then it's really time to inject some action or force the players to act. Or sometimes as a game master, I would hint, all right, you've learned everything you can. It's really time to move on. What's your plan?
That pretty direct, like there's no more information here. Yeah,
right. But there's also, like in East Texas, they had a professor who, kind of knew who they were and would work with them. So, a phone call from the professor could always kick things into action.
When you guys, and Chris, feel free to answer too. I don't mean to just be bombarding you, Laura, with our questions here. So when you guys are running a game, how much advance planning do you do, like, about kind of the pace and the tone of the game? Like, do you think, okay, the first couple of sessions here are going to be pretty serious and it's going to get dark and grim, but then, maybe 3 sessions in, we're going to switch and do something a little bit more lighthearted? And then do you think that far ahead? Are you able to think that far ahead based on the way you kind of plan your games? Or do you just react moment to moment based on how the players are doing?
I feel like I should answer because you said that I could. Yeah, I don't have a great answer for this. Honestly, I mostly run one-shots these days. And so with those, I do script out a little bit. Like, I script out the points that I want to hit throughout the evening pretty tightly. So we're always sort of aiming towards something, because I think, like, one-shots have a tendency to end up, like, you just, like, the plot sort of, like, blows up and then you don't accomplish what you want, right? Like that. So I think you have to take a bit of a firmer hand with those. I mean, I'm completely fine doing that as well. I think some people are like, well, that's, it's sacred that you let the players do whatever they want. It's like, well, but we want to tell a story too.
So, Chris, thinking back, you ran like a lunchtime game for a really long time for some coworkers. Were you planning each session, the night before you ran it, or did you have charted out what was going to happen so you could kind of guide and nudge the tone of the game as it went along?
With that game, I quickly realized that, like, a lunchtime session, like, you really only end up having 45 minutes or so after you kind of take into account, like, getting set up and taking down and stuff like that. I quickly realized that any of my plans that were longer than a half an hour were just is a waste of time. So what I would do is I'd plan, like, the 1 or 2 things that, like, we were going to do in that session and try to hit those. And then also, the idea was always to do something interesting, whether it be a battle or some sort of role-playing scene or shopping, what have you, and then a cliffhanger as much as possible. So we're always sort of shooting for a cliffhanger.
Oh,
like
so
that.
Cruel.
Yes, yeah. What the advantage there is, when we got back together the next session, which was usually the next week, like that, we could be like, this is exactly where we are, because you've either been thinking about it, or I can very quickly explain, like, you've just launched this friendly NPC up into the air with a levitate spell. I'll see you next week. Like, that was, it was always something along those lines.
When I'm planning, I plan in season arcs. So I created a theme for the first season of East Texas, which was witches versus werewolves. So there was a core conflict that I knew kind of a basics of between a group of witches in the sorority house and a werewolf, because one of them had accidentally killed one of the other ones, and it just resulted in this major conflict. So everything in the story, every major event, kind of fell from that one thing. So I had this big arc, but in terms of adventures, I didn't plan out more than 1 or 2 sessions, because I really wanted the characters to kind of drive this. Like, they would tell me, we're really interested in getting to know this professor. And so then that was the way that we attacked the story. And then, like, they met the sorority sisters, and they're all, like, haughty and whatnot. So so they became obviously the adversary. So they kind of fell in that way. But then the most dramatic thing for me is to have somebody that you think you can trust, and then they break your trust. And so I always have those kind of reversals in feeling, where you maybe it goes the other way, and then your enemy becomes your ally, and the whole thing is transient and back and forth. So I have, like, this point in the distance where I'm always heading with a campaign, but moment to moment, I don't actually necessarily know how I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
Did you find that your players, did it take much work to get them to grasp the tone of what you're going for with the game?
They set the tone, because,
Okay.
I talked about some of our levity, but a lot of our levity was, these are college kids, and they're all having sex with each other. So there was a lot of aggressive flirting, a lot of, innuendo jokes. So they kind of set that tone. But, as soon as a monster showed up, they'd be like, oh, we got to deal with this. I was really thankful. One of my players took the disadvantage, if you can call it a disadvantage, of heroic. It's so nice as a game master to have that person at the table that's like, yes, let's put ourselves in danger to save this innocent person.
Yeah.
That's great.
Good way to get the action going.
I was just thinking about you'd mentioned the having those reversals and stuff, like your ally ends up being your enemy, that sort of thing. Like I'm a sucker and I fall for that every single time. Like my GM listens to this podcast now and then. Anytime he does it, it's just like, yep,
Well,
I'm hook, line, and sinker.
Please fall for that, because I mean,
Yeah.
if you never trust anything, then the story just is kind of bland, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. To put some emotion into it, you gotta end up trusting something, or at least pretend that you trust something, and it's okay when it falls apart, because I'm not out to get you. I'm here to have fun with you. I've also have you folks used X cards?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At conventions, yeah.
I've sort of used that flavor and even the home group for various reasons, but it can be really handy for someone to make it clear what's really bothering them and why they're not engaging. Yeah, I don't think any of my ETU players really have anything taboo, but I was definitely in a convention game. And actually, I'm the one who said some things that were kind of offensive in the moment, and somebody else X-carded me, and I just immediately apologized, and we moved on.
Yeah, I think the presence of it is helpful. I think just to set the tone of it's okay if there's something that you don't like, and I think that helps people be more mindful. What I found, oftentimes when I'm introducing the X card, I usually introduce it along with something that like would be something that I would pull it on. Like there's a few things like for me that it's just like it's very important, like that we're not going to do this. Like so, I think that's helpful to set set it up that way. So we've talked about like a lot of different parts of this question. I guess, is there anything else that anyone wanted to bring up that you're thinking about?
How much do you guys use action in your games?
A lot.
Quite a bit. Yeah,
I would say I use action to drive to plot points, if that makes sense. Like action is rarely interesting to me if it's just action for the sake of it. To me, it's always like it's driving you towards sort of the next narrative point.
Yeah, when I ran D&D, I used to have a formula where I would do 3 combats, like an intro combat, kind of a setup for a reversal combat, and then a final battle. But it just got to be too much, and now the style of role-playing games I like don't really lend themselves to having that many combats in a session. So now it tends to be just like one, usually a big fight at the end.
Yeah, like I've played D&D, a little bit. I've played a lot of different systems and stuff, and I find myself like thinking about running D&D again, and the combat being the part that I'm not super excited about, because like it's not the part that I'm interested in right now. Right, that could change.
That's why I don't really play D&D anymore, because the system is so focused around the combat, but that's the least interesting part of role playing to me.
I've found running Band of Blades and then playing in other games that use that system, that as a GM, I really appreciate the structure that it has. Like it has a really clear structure of like you spend a certain amount of time doing like a traditional RPG style, kind of D&D-ish mission. And then you spend the second half of your session doing a sequence of other non-combat stuff. So like there's bookkeeping, there's planning for future missions and things like that. And some of those things include, like do a role-playing moment at this point. And I'm not used to playing games that are quite so structured, but I've come to really appreciate it. And when we typically play 2 hours at a time, and I do my best to, the mission usually goes for like about an hour and 15 minutes. But I try to reserve that last 45 minutes to make sure we hit all of the other stuff, because the mission just almost inevitably tends to be really combat and action focused.
Yeah, I never really put that together, because so I've run Blades in the Dark, which is a similar game to Band of Blades. Same general setup, but like all the stuff that feels kind of like superfluous, right? If you're coming from D&D and stuff like that, all the bookkeeping and stuff. Like to me, that was the best part of the game. Like I almost didn't really enjoy the actual encounters that much. It was the after effects of that. Like, okay, like lots of bad stuff just happened to you. Like, how are you going to recover from that? And like, then that's when we could tease apart some story stuff.
One thing that's helpful about, like, for instance, Band of Blades, and sorry that I'm constantly talking about that game.
Yeah, that's what you're running right now. So
the check is in the mail.
Yeah. that downtime period, it contains a lot of decision points. Like the players have to make important decisions during that time. So it's not like a just free role-playing time. There's hard decisions that have to be made. They just aren't action-y or combat.
Okay, so it's probably about time to wrap up the conversation. Laura, this was really great. You have completely sold me on East Texas University. I don't know if that was
Yeah,
your intent or not, but I want to play that game so bad.
You can check out the 6 episodes that I ran, which was basically a condensed version of the first season that I ran for my players.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The YouTube through Untold Stories project.
Cool. Yeah. We'll throw a link to that in the show notes as well. So I have it. Yeah, and a link to UConn. Which, speaking of UConn, like, what are the dates again? If you could go over those for people who want to participate.
November 19 to 21 at the Ann Arbor Marriott Ypsilanti Hotel at Eagle Crest.
Yeah.
I'm just remembering, like, I saw for like years that one of the East Texas University books at my friendly local gaming store, and I think it's gone now. I think someone bought it, but I'm kicking myself for not checking it out. Yeah, there it is. I'm gonna have to scurry over there this week and see if they still have a copy.
The PDFs are very affordable.
And is it just one? Is it just one rule book, or
There is a rule book, and and I didn't buy this the first time, but a friend picked it up at a flea market for me. The Degrees of Horror. This is a campaign book. It's got a major campaign arc for all 4 years of school, and then it's got a bunch of individual adventures, so you can kind of flavor it however you want. There's definitely a lot of room to put your own spin on it, though, because if you go with the pace that Savage Worlds encourages you to do experience, then you definitely need to create your own filler. Although they have a ton of content available that you can, pay $5 and get those one-pager episodes that I mentioned. Those are really, really fun to run.
Yeah.
So, Chris, I pitched Band of Blades, and we've learned a lot about East Texas University, but you haven't really sold us on a game so far in this episode. So
it's your turn.
Do I have to
come on, let's hear a pitch for something that.
Okay, it's my giant heartbreaker.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fix D&D.
Does it have hundreds of classes and?
Oh, it has thousands of classes.
Thousands of classes. Okay.
Yeah, I got to make sure that it's yeah.
And the most realistic.
No, I don't have anything. Yeah, I don't have anything to pitch right now. I mean, other than Blades in the Dark is great, right? Like, it's been a while since we talked about Blades in the Dark.
Well, what are you running right now?
I'm not running anything right now. Because I've got the baby. So that's tough. And then we're also. Yeah.
I took a hiatus when my kids were born.
Yeah.
Are you planning something? I mean, every GM has always got a campaign that they're noodling about, even when they aren't actively running.
Yeah, it's the same one that I've been noodling about for a while. Like, I have this big, this is probably also a heartbreaker, this big, I want to do a sort of shared collaborative world building game to start with, and then run some individual stories within that.
Like Powered by the Apocalypse?
Yeah, like that, but probably a little bit more homebrew, and we might actually jump around between systems as well, depending on what sorts of stories we want to tell. I don't know if it'll ever come together. I think the first part of it might come together, the actual the world building, the world building part of it. So we've got some really fun ideas for drawing a map together and stuff. We'll see. I don't know when it's going to happen. We're planning a small convention for the people that have been on the podcast, so that's coming up pretty soon. So that's where a lot of my focus is. And then after that's done, then maybe I'll have all sorts of energy and time to vote.
Yeah, because
right?
Life won't throw anything at it. If there's anything we've learned in the last year and a half, it's that.
Yeah, it's all just smooth sailing once you get past that next thing.
That's right.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you, Laura, for coming on. Yeah. I think that's it. Andy, is there anything else that we should mention?
So we do have a tradition of asking guests, if they're willing, to replace the topic that we rolled with a topic of their choosing. So you don't have to, Laura, if you don't feel like it, but if you have... okay.
Oh, okay.
Let's hear it.
So it's just in honor of the convention. I would say the difference is as a game master and running a one-shot versus running a campaign. How do you do that differently?
That's great.
Great question.
All right, we will replace that on the table.
Okay.
Someone else will have to answer it.
Giving someone else a chore.
That's right.
Yes, of course. Everybody who adds a topic to the table gets this this glint in their eye. They're so excited to make someone else talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to hear what other people think about that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap it up there. Again, thank you, Laura. I've been Chris Salzman.
I've been Andy Rao.
And remember, if your players are having fun, you're a great GM.